Hi everyone, this is Holly from Hot Humble Pie. Welcome to my channel if you're new, and a big warm hello to my subscribers. I love you guys. So many of you were asking me if I had any videos on how to make my bows, so I decided to put together 10 of my favorite bows in easy to follow tutorials. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I'd love it if you click that button. For the first bow, we're going to remove the wire that comes on the side. Now this is just for the tail of the bow. I don't necessarily always need wire in the tail ends of the bow, so I remove that wire and save it so that I can use it to tie in the center of the bow to hold it together. Now this is a traditional floral bow. This is super easy to make. I'm making a really light looped one. You can make these, you can make them with as many loops as you want or as little loops as you want, and they'll be either fuller, flatter, wider. You can make the loops as wide as you want. You can make them as small as you want. It's all up to you how big your gift is, whether it's for a wedding or, it depends on what occasion you're doing, but this is the process. You're just rolling it around like you see me doing here, around and around and around. And you're going to have that little piece on the bottom that you saw that wasn't quite the length of the ribbon. Go ahead and leave that. Now I'm showing you how you can go ahead and cut it on either side with little slits. I usually do them at a triangle shape, but because this is a smaller floral bow, I'm going to skip the cutting part because it's not going to be necessary since there's not that much bulk when I'm going to squish the center of this bow together. So now I'm using the wire that I removed from the part that I'm going to use for the tail, and I'm going to go ahead and twist it around and tie it. Now that's the piece I was talking about. I'm just tucking it there to get it out of the way, but you're going to end up using that piece for the center loop of this bow. So I just twisted the wire and I bent it to the side, and that's really important so you don't poke yourself, and that makes it so you can work with it easily. Now here's the thing with the floral bows. You want to go to the center there in the middle of your little loops, and you want to pull the first loop out to the right or left, either one, and then do the opposite side. So you can see how I'm going into the loops. I'm going to show you on the other side. I'm pulling the one in the center out. Now there's that piece. That doesn't count. That's going to be the middle. But I go to the other side. See, I go to the left side now, and I'm looking for that inner loop on the inside of those loops. And I'm going to pull it out to the left and then twist it a little bit. And then I'm going to go to the right, and I'm going to look for the next loop, and I'm going to pull it out and twist it a little bit. And that's how you get your nice, pretty shape that's called a floral bow. Now that center piece right there, that's the piece that you're going to be using to fold over and give it a pretty center. You don't have to do that. The floral bows look pretty without this, and you can glue buttons or jewels in the center. But if you want to do this and you want to utilize that piece, you can. If you don't, you would just, instead of pulling it forward like that, you would just push it the other way underneath the bow and either cut it off or glue it down so it's out of the way and it's not visible. Now after I kind of curl it around, get an idea where it's going to be, I start fluffing my bow out again, because when I hot glue that down, it's going to hold some of those loops in place, so you kind of want to have them positioned before you add your hot glue. And I'm just adding a little bit of glue on the tail end of that piece. I'm going to kind of round it out and fold it over like that and glue it down. And with all bows, because you have to manipulate them quite a bit to get their shape, the last thing you want to do is just fluff everything up again so it looks nice and pretty. Now here's my tail, and the way I go about doing this tail is I'm just going to fold it evenly and then fold it in half again with the edge towards me, towards the bottom of the table, cut it at an angle, and that's going to give me a nice finished dovetail edge. For the tail part, I do like one of the little tails to be just a little bit shorter, so you can see me lifting it just a little bit. I think it kind of adds a homemade look and a little bit of charm to the bow. If you like symmetry, you can do it that way too. That's just how I make my bows, and you just glue it together like you saw me doing there, and you're going to glue the bow on top of that, and that's it. You're going to end up with a beautiful floral bow for gifts, weddings, special occasions, you name it. So for this bow, it's essentially the same thing as the floral bow, but it's done with a ton more loops, probably double the loops than the first bow. And that ends in a result that looks kind of like a pom-pom or a flower, which where it gets its name of like a pom-pom ribbon. Well, some people, when you go online, it's called different things, but I think it's most commonly referred to as the Pom Pom Ribbon Bow. And it kind of takes on a look of almost a rose. It's super cute, but I'm going to use this whole roll. Well, minus the part that I use for the tails, but that's why it's going to be super, super thick. So you can see I just rolled it all around. And I think my loops measured probably about 5 inches here. Now we have a lot of bulk. So this is a little bit of a different strategy when you're making this kind of floral bow. It's still a floral bow, but I'm going to do those slits up either side. You bend it in half. That's how you get it even. You bend it in half so the ends meet at the other side so it's perfectly even. And then you cut your little slits at the top. Now I'm going to cut it at an angle. This is actually the traditional way to make a floral bow, but I only utilize this method, and you only have to utilize this method because it is more work if it's a lot of bulk. So if you know you're going to have to tie it in the center and you want that nice clean center, you can do it this way. Now, you can also skip it if you're going to do that loop in the middle or glue something in the middle. But I just wanted to show you that this is the traditional way to make a floral bow, just so you know how, since I'm doing a tutorial, just so you know how they were originally made. They do have those little side angle notches that are made for the ribbon you're going to tie around in the middle. Now, normally, I would leave the ribbon bent in half and then cut at an angle, just like you saw me do with the dovetail on my first bow for the tail. But because this was so thick, I was unable to do that, at least not with my scissors. You need really, really sharp scissors for that. I had to do it separately. But either way, it works out. So now I'm tying on the tail, and it's going to go nice and easy on those notches, which is why we make them. It just kind of makes it nice and clean and small in the middle. This is really critical, I think, if you have a floral bow with not so many loops, and you're definitely going to see the middle. It gives a nice, clean middle. But if you're making a really bulky one like this, you don't actually need that angle because you're not going to see it. This is kind of that pom-pom look or that flower look, and it's so many loops that it's like a treasure hunt just trying to find the center of the bow when you're all done. So it's not critical, but again, I just wanted to show you how. And again, I am taking the loop in the middle there, the very first one. I'm pulling it out to the right, twisting it a little bit. Then I'm going to go to the other side, grab the next loop in order. So you don't skip over and grab the loop on top or in the middle. You grab the one that's at the very bottom, closest to the center, and you pull those out to either side and just twist them so that you end up with nice uniformity all around the bow. Now, if you want to slow this down and watch it in slow speed, there is that option on YouTube. You can watch any video in any speed you want. Look for a little icon on the video itself at the bottom that looks like a flower. Click it and you'll see playback speed, and you can go from there. Now, because I left the wire in these, the little tails, I like to use my fingers and kind of curl the tails and kind of make them look like they're flowing like water, like a waterfall. Normally I would tack that down with hot glue on a gift, but that's it. Now here comes our classic simple bow, and a personal favorite of mine. I think it's just the traditional bow. And the way I go about doing it is I just make the formation you can see me doing right here with the ribbon. And the top part are going to be your loops. So you're going to see me kind of pull in different directions until I get the width of, the width that I want. If you want a really big bow, obviously you're going to go wider. If you want a smaller bow, you'll go smaller. But I try to go, I try to take into account the width of the ribbon when I'm making the width of the actual bow itself. So when I'm happy with the measurement, I think I've got about the right width at the top and enough length left to do some decent tails, I'm just going to take some of that leftover wire that I pulled out from the ribbon before the first bow, and I'm going to tie it in the center. Again, bending the wire down for safety. Now, I have also made these bows with twine, like little tiny thin twine in the center, a lot of times to avoid myself from getting pricked from wire, and that's perfectly fine because you can see I'm taking a piece of the ribbon right there and I'm going to be covering the middle, so you're not going to see whatever you tie it with anyway, so you pretty much can use anything there that you want. And it's that simple. I'm just going to hot glue that little piece of ribbon in the center nice and evenly, and do it on both sides, and you'll end up with a really pretty, perfect little simple classic bow. Now you can make this bow without the tails and then do the tails separately. I prefer to include the tails, and then I kind of yank them downwards. You can see me doing it there. I kind of grab them, pull them downwards to force them down, but I think the final result looks more natural that way. Totally up to you. Either way looks nice. And I'm dovetailing it, and that's it. So this next bow is the classic gift bow that we see in the big bags in every single department store during Christmas time. We're going to be making that one. And I'm starting with this beautiful ticking stripe ribbon, and I'm going to cut 3 sections measuring out at 12 inches, and then another 3 sections measuring out at 11 inches. And I'm not going to cut my final section until the very end, and I will show you why when we get there. Next, we're going to take those ribbon strips that we cut and form or make these little formations right here. And they're actually fun to do. They're not that hard once you get the swing of it. I'm going to go really, really slow, and I'm going to show you 2 of them so that you can rewind your video, change your playback speed, do whatever you need to do. So you'll see me take the top loop there, twirl it around, and then the bottom piece I'm going to curl upwards and then spin it in the opposite direction so that the bottom end meets the top end and lays nice and flat. We're going to use a little bit of hot glue to hold that down, and then we're going to glue that piece down to the ribbon underneath. So once you have all of your little formations made, and you should have 6 all together, you're going to start gluing them together. And we start by gluing 2 in a cross shape, and then you're going to be gluing the other ones in, a X shape across that. Well, you'll see. I'm going to glue it here at the angle. And I'm going to glue the other one next in the opposite direction, so it's like the letter X. And then when you do the last 2, you're going to follow the first cross shape that you did. And now we have a great visual from the top view on how those loops go between the other loops. You can see there's one underneath, then there's 2 that go to the side, and then there's another loop above that. In other words, the little tiny loops, they go between the loops that are right below it each time you add one. And when we finally get a center that looks small enough that it can be filled up with a loop that's about the same size as the loops that you've made, that's when you add your final singular little loop right here, and you just stick it in the middle, and voila, you've just made a beautiful custom gift bow. So now we have the layered bow, and you're going to start by making the base for this bow with a loop, and the width of that depends on how wide the ribbon is that you start with, what kind of package you're going to be putting it on, or what you're using it for. I'm making a loop that's about 7 inches or 8 inches wide maybe, and you just glue the two ends together using a little bit of hot glue. Next, you're going to push this down nice and flat so that it forms a nice base for the loops that you're going to make. Next, you're going to cut out little pieces of extra ribbon that you're going to be bending in half into smaller loops and forming loops like I'm going to show you here. Now, I'm also showing you another method that you can do if you want to keep it all together in one ribbon shape. You can do this and fold it like an accordion and make it that way. I always do them individual because I feel like I have a little bit more control that way on where I want to place them and how they look, but you can do it either way. Once you have all your little loops made, you're going to want to place them down before you commit in hot glue, just to make sure that everything is fitting nicely and looks nice and balanced. The next step is gluing those little loops that you made down onto the base. Fluff out the little loops that you made. Next, you gently open the center just a little bit because we're going to be adding a loop in the middle. You can skip this step if you want to. I think it looks pretty. If you skip it, it will look more like an accordion bow, but either way is a nice look. Now we're going to make our tails, and this is a little trick I like to do with the wire bows. It just makes it lay flatter and makes it easier to work with when you're making the tails. Is you get it like that, and then you flip it over like that with your thumb or your finger, whatever you want to do, and then you press it down and you have a nice flat surface that you can glue to the bottom of your bow. Of course, we have to finish off the ends with a pretty dovetail, and that's it. Next, we have the 4-loop bow. This is pretty straightforward. You're just going to make like a simple classic bow, and then you're going to make another bow to go on top of that. So I'm just making the crisscross formation again for my classic bow that I did earlier, and I'm just measuring it here, manipulating it so I can get all the loops the length that I want it to be, and then I'll cut the ends. Since this is burlap and it's a little bit stiffer than normal ribbon to work with, I do like to secure it a little bit in the middle with some hot glue. Next, I'm going to make another loop, and I'm going to check it for size first. You need to do that just to make sure before you commit that it's going to be looking the way you want it to, and then I'm just going to finish it off on the ends and connect it together to make a loop with a little bit of hot glue. Once I have everything balanced and placed where I want it to be, I go ahead and use a little bit of the jute twine to tie it in the center. And this is what we have so far. I actually love that look, and you can stop there if you want to. I often do. It looks really pretty, but I'm going to go ahead and add a piece of ribbon in the center just to finish it, but you can absolutely skip this step and the bow will still look beautiful. We're going to go ahead and finish off the tails nicely, and we're all done with our bow. Next is the flower bow. I like to call it that because I think it looks like a little flower. Normally you do need a bow maker for this, but this is a hack. I just do it with glue. Takes a little bit of time, but it's totally fun to do and the results are beautiful. You're going to start by making a bunch of loops in whatever size you want, and then you're going to take another color ribbon or another print and you're going to make more loops, but you're going to make these loops smaller. Now I chose to have it where the loop underneath was about 3/4 of an inch bigger than the loop in the center. You got to think like a flower where you have the outer petals that are lighter and the inner petals that are darker. You're kind of creating that illusion with this bow. And then you're just going to take and start gluing your loops all together. So you start with that cross formation and then you start gluing all the loops in the opposite direction. So you do the cross, then you do the crisscross, and you just keep building it up until you have a nice full bow. And you'll see in a minute here, you'll add the center and do the same thing. Lastly, I had this little snowflake from a ribbon from the Dollar Tree that I thought was so cute, and I am making this for a Christmas bow, so I decided to glue the snowflake in the center. Also, I ran short of the candy cane ribbon that I used at the bottom, and I went back to buy some more. They didn't have any. I would have liked to have added 2 more loops right there. That would have been perfect, but it still came up totally cute, and I wanted to show you how to do it. This next one is the 6-loop bow, and I always think this one looks a little bit like a butterfly and is one of the more striking bows you can put on gift packages. It's one of my personal favorites. I have a lot of favorites, but this is one of them. So you just start off by making 2 loops in any size that you want. Next, you'll cut a strip of ribbon that's just a little bit tinier than the 2 that you've cut. Now I'm going to take these and just add a little hot glue like we've done before and glue them together to form a loop. You're going to flatten them down and then put them in a crisscross formation like this. Next, you're going to take the smaller loop that you've made, squish it together in the center, and then you're going to glue another piece of the ribbon around the center to make a bow. Now, I didn't use floral wire for this. I didn't bother with any of that because this ribbon is really, really thin. It's a silk ribbon, so it's easy enough to do just using the ribbon itself to tie the center. And you want the center kind of to have like a square look for this bow or a rectangle look, like a block look. You don't want it to kind of be squished like it's tied really tightly in the center. That's part of the look. But whenever I mention something that is like a traditional thing, I always try to mention that there is no fast, hard rule when it comes to crafting or art. Do what makes you happy and looks good to you. So here you see me taking the 2 bigger loops, crisscrossing them, crunching them together in the center, and I will be tying those tightly in the middle with some of the wire that I pulled out from the first bow that I made. And now you can see I'm kind of spreading it out in that butterfly formation I was talking about, which is why it reminds me of a butterfly. Isn't that pretty? It looks so pretty. And you just add a little bit of hot glue, put your smaller bow that you've made in the center, and that's it as far as the bow. The next thing we need to do is the tail, and I'm just going to make it the way that I've been making it throughout the video, only this time I waited to measure it until I was done with the bow, because in the past I've made them too short or too long and they weren't balanced with the size of the bow. I just like with the butterfly bow to make it after I've made the butterfly bow. I don't know why. I guess I've had mistakes in the past happen, but we're going to do that thing again, that little trick where I just take it and flip the top over so it's nice and flat, and we can glue the bow on top of it. Now you're going to fluff your pretty little bow out, all pretty and fluffy, or you can leave it flat if you want, but I like to fluff mine out, and that's it. It's all ready for whatever you want to place it on. This bow is a lot of fun to make, super easy. You're just going to be making 3 loops, one in large, medium, and small. That's how you have to think of it, just so you have like half an inch or an inch of the other bow sticking out so you can see it. It gives a lot of texture and variety and dimension to your bow. And again, I hesitate giving measurements because it really depends on what you're going to use it for, what size your package is. These are all custom made, and I'm making mine for a package, so I'm just doing it by eye based on the size of the box. But I start off by making my first big loop, and I'm going to squish it down flat like I have done with the others. And I'm going to do my medium size one, and then I'm going to do my small one. Once you have all 3 loops done, you're just going to choose one of the ribbons to use for your center. I always like to use the one that I use for the top for my middle, so in this case I used the red ticking striped ribbon for the top. That's the smallest loop on the top there, and so I'm using that for the middle as well, but you certainly can use any one of those ribbons that you want, or you could use something completely different if you want to. Again, just have fun and go with whatever you think looks good. But I'm just kind of making sure that everything is balanced and nice and neat, and then we're just going to glue this down and we have the center of our bow. For my tail, I don't really want the wire look. I just kind of want it to lay nice and soft, and I want to pinch it at the top so it lays a little closer to each other. You'll see in a minute. But I saved that wire for future bows, so save that wire, you guys. We're going to finish it off with a dovetail end, and then we're going to glue the bow on top of it. See right here, you can see me doing it. Because there's no wire in the bow, it allows you to pinch it up at the top. I can get that one side a little shorter because I love that look, and it creates a completely different look for your bow, but I love the way this one came out. This next bow is called the Messy Bow, and it is really hot on the scene as of late. This is a really easy and fun bow to make. I love this bow simply for the reason that it allows you to add so many different kinds of ribbon in it, so you end up with these textures and patterns and all dimension and colors that you can't achieve making a normal bow when it only has 2 loops or 4 loops or even 6 loops. It just gives you a lot of, I guess, variety. And you can make it with ribbon, you can make it with cloth. All you do is cut different strips of ribbon in different kinds of ribbon or cloth again, and that's it. That is the Messy Bow. I like to use different widths of ribbon, so I'll start with thicker ribbon and then I'll go down to thinner ribbon and just use different patterns, textures, colors. Anything goes pretty much with this bow. That's why I like it so much. And it's one of those bows where, because I used to look at all of my ribbon and think, wow, these are all so beautiful. It's a shame I can't show them all off on my package or at one time, because when you see them in a store and you walk in and you see all this beautiful ribbon, you're not seeing just one, you're seeing all of them, and you get one, I guess, feeling from it, right? So, it represents the season or the look you're going for, and that's what you can achieve with the Messy Bow, which is why I like it so much, because it really is a statement piece for whatever feeling or season you're trying to convey in your craft or on your gift or whatever you're doing. So here you lay it down in the crisscross formation like the letter X. It makes it a lot easier to fluff it out at the end, and you're going to flip it over, tie it in the center, fluff it out, and then end up with this beautiful statement piece bow. The only thing that's a little bit of a drawback with this bow, and it's a tiny one that I can think of, is that if you add a lot of ribbon, it makes it harder to tie in the middle because it's really chunky and thick, so you really have to hold it down, and you have to use a strong ribbon in the center to tie it because you're going to need to pull really tight and you don't want it to break. But even then, once you fluff it out, as you'll see at the end, you cannot see the chunky center at all, so don't feel like you have to remove any ribbon. If you really like the look that you have, you can keep all your ribbon in there. And lastly, something I like to do, again, this is optional, you do not have to do this, you just, well, I like to take and dovetail the ends of just random pieces of ribbon that you can see here and there. So I like it mixed in with the straight edges, and I like it mixed in with the dovetail, and I even like to cut some of the edges at an angle sometimes. It just depends, again, the look that I'm going for. But really love this bow. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making it. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And as always, until the next video, breathe deep, fret not, and do things that make you happy.